Aaron, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And then I'm going to turn it over to you for yet another budget update. Aaron Doler from the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. Thanks for getting on, Aaron.
Sure. So unfortunately, I'm not sure if I have much to update that you all haven't heard before. We had hoped that Congress would at least have released an omnibus appropriations bill by now, but they have not. They are still negotiating, as far as we can tell, over some big-ticket policy riders, especially relating to environmental regulations and Syrian and Iraqi refugees, and then some other things as well. And until they get those things hammered out, we probably won't see a bill. So prognosticating it is sort of hard, though everyone's still, sticking to the talking point that we will get this done. They're almost certainly going to pass a short-term continuing resolution to continue the current funding levels for just a couple of days to give them more time. So government funding, the last CR that passed at the end of September runs out December 11th, this Friday, so they'll probably continue that into the next week. But everyone says that they will be done by the 18th, which is when Congress is technically out of session. Hopefully that's true. We just don't know. So yeah, I wish I had more to say, but right now we're just twiddling our thumbs, waiting for Congress to get these things worked out. The other thing that is moving, which I think is important to note, is you all probably have been following, at least somewhat, this housing reform bill, H.R. 3700. The acronym is HOTMA. And that bill does a bunch of different things, but it's very consensus-based to make a bunch of, changes to the voucher program and some other things as well, but mainly the voucher program. That bill, we have an extensive look at the provisions in the bill on our website compared to current law. If you want to check that out, it would take too long to go through every provision on this call. And that bill got marked up and passed out of the full committee yesterday. So that likely means that it is on track to pass the House, and at which point we would then turn to the Senate to try to get some of these things actually enacted before the end of this Congress. Housing reform bills are notoriously impossible to get passed. There have been many over the last 10 years or so that have moved and then stopped, and so we'll see where this one goes, but it's a first step at least. So those are the two things I think that are really moving right now in Congress.
Thanks, Aaron. This is Cindy again. I have a couple of questions. Well, before I go back to the budget, on the reform bill, can you just give us like 2 or 3 highlights of what some of the major changes are?
Yeah. So a large amount of the bill is a number of reforms on project-based vouchers that it lifts the 20% cap on vouchers as long as they're used on project-based vouchers, as long as they're used for certain populations or in hard-to-use, difficult-to-use areas. So that probably is a pretty big change for certain housing authorities that have bumped up against that cap. There are a number of other small changes to VVVs that sort of just make them easier to use in various ways. There's some voucher reform stuff that, like there have been some proposals in recent years to sort of make it easier for families to move in and for HQS to not be as, that's housing quality standards, the inspection that units have to pass. Often those can be a pretty big barrier, even if a unit fails HQS by a very minimal thing. Families still can't move in, which is especially problematic for someone, say, experiencing homelessness, that really time is of the essence. So there are some changes that make move-in faster and sort of offer some more flexibility around that inspection. So a number of things around that. There's some relatively large FUP changes.
I'm sorry, what kind of changes?
If your community runs a FUP program, extending the eligible age up to 24 for youth, extending the time that youth can use FUP vouchers to 36 months, and extending eligibility to youth that will be leaving the foster care system within 90 days, so sort of extends the eligibility backwards a little bit, so youth don't have to be sort of already out of the system and already homeless to get a FUP voucher. You can use it sort of as a preventative transition measure. So all of those seem like really positive improvements in the FUP program. There are some rent policy changes that are pretty wonky, but sort of reduce the medical deduction and increase the standard deduction. Those are some things that come to mind on big things. But as I said, there's a very extensive side by side of current law and this proposed law on our website, and I think we'll be releasing a blog later today as well about the bill. So you can look for that, and I'm sure the blog will link to that side by side. So if you want to check out our blog later today, that might be the easiest place to get more information.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I'm going to ask one more question going back to the budget, and then I'll open it up to folks on the call. I understand you don't have details. They haven't put the omnibus out. You said they're negotiating some big-ticket policy riders, refugees with environment, I think you said. Those are pretty big-ticket things. They're going to have that resolved and move a budget by December 18th?
Well, they're very specific policy riders. They're not looking at, all environmental regulations. The Republicans want to roll back some pretty specific things that the Obama administration has been pushing, and Democrats don't want that. So there seems to be a deal happening that Democrats will give on some oil export things, and Republicans will give a little bit on their environmental thing. The Syrian refugees is pretty specifically about sort of tightening eligibility or tightening the number of people that come from Syria and Iraq as refugees in response to the terrorist attacks, and Democrats don't want those. So, but then there's the last we've heard is that the compromise is something around more general oversight of giving out visas, tighter restrictions. So, again, we're not getting a lot of details, but it seems that these are sort of specific policy proposals that certain groups want, and then there is a counter proposal, and they're just sort of tweaking around the edges until they find some middle ground, we think. But again, this is all very, very, very closed door, very high level, and all we're getting is little itty bitty, one sentence summaries from the press. So I don't know. That's really just my hypothesis.
Okay. All right. Well, they're talking. That's good. So I will open this up. Does anybody have questions for Aaron? Remember *7 to unmute your line if you've muted. And if you haven't muted, please use the *6 to mute. Thanks. Questions? All right. I think people are probably pretty numb at this point. But I thank you, Aaron. I know that you'll let us know as soon as anything does happen, and we will certainly get stuff out by email.
Definitely. Yep. As soon as something happens, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Thanks, then. I guess we'll turn to the state budget. Between the warmer than usual weather and the fact that we're still talking about budgets, it's really hard to believe that we're in December with holidays upon us, but here we are. And the latest news, I did hear on NPR yesterday that Illinois also does not have a budget, that they're about 6 months late. So we're in good company. What happened yesterday, for those of you who have not been hanging on every headline, is I guess on Monday maybe the Senate passed a budget bill which was reflective of the compromise reached by, they say, the five parties, meaning the four caucuses, Democrat, Republican, House, and Senate, and the governor's office. They passed it. It's $30.8 billion from a housing and community development perspective. It's very nice. We're seeing increases about 3 to 5% in the homeless assistance and the Human Services Development Fund. A whopping 310% increase in Keystone Communities, up to $25 million from the current $6 million. I certainly did not study all of the other human services line items. Education was a big thing that they're touting, a large increase for education, and I will invite other people to talk about line items they're focusing on. But at any rate, the Senate passed it 43-7. It went to the House. The House has not touched the Senate bill, passed their own bill, slightly smaller, 30.2 or $3 billion. Claiming that it was more manageable. From the housing community development point of view, there was a small, I think 3% increase in Keystone Communities, so that we're still in the $6 billion range with a slight bump up, maybe closer to 7. And the other two items I mentioned, homeless assistance, HSDF, were level funded. They sent that to the Senate yesterday. The Senate immediately took it into the Appropriations Committee, gutted it, and dropped in the language of the Senate bill. And I don't think they passed it yesterday. I assume they will today. Send it back. Well, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. And then send it back over to the House. There is talk in the media about a conference committee, which is very unusual in state government, but certainly could happen. And there you would have conference appointees, committee appointees negotiating something palatable to both sides, presumably, and then hopefully it goes through both chambers. So, of course, we're in the midst of advocacy for the line items. We certainly prefer the Senate version. Also for revenue, I know not all organizations are in a position to do this, but the Housing Alliance has felt for a number of years that that we can't ask for increases in program funding if we're not also supporting revenue increases. So we are supporting not specific taxes, but we are talking about revenue and hoping that some of the legislators will see fit to do that. Let me see, what else do I want to say about that? So the action, at least shortly, will be back in the House, we will be asking the House to support the agreed-to framework, which was in the Senate bill. And the one thing that neither House nor Senate have put forth yet is the revenue package, how this is all going to be paid for over and above what we currently have coming into the state. So that's really up in the air. Pensions and liquor reform are still part of the conversation. I think pension more than liquor. But that's part of the compromise package. I'm not an expert on the pension stuff, so if anybody else wants to comment on that, you're welcome to. That's about what I know. It's a waiting game, and I guess the other, other thing that I was going to add is this coming weekend is the Pennsylvania Society Gathering in New York City at the Waldorf Astoria. We've been hearing that a number of legislators are canceling their reservations, which on the one hand is good that they're not going to party in New York while the budget is left hanging here. On the other hand, it tells me they're not going to have it done by Friday, or they don't think they're going to have it done by Friday. So I'm going to open this up to comments from anyone on the phone, any of you who are following the state budget. Remember, you can *7 to unmute your phone if you're muted. Questions or thoughts, anything anybody is hearing? Any other line items that you all are following that you want to talk about?
Hi, this is Lori in Northampton, and yesterday at our regional housing advisory board meeting, we did kind of take a poll of how this is affecting our different nonprofits, our different local government agencies. And, you know, the one thing that keeps coming up is the fact that while a few of them are seeing significant decreases in services, some have cut back, but primarily we have this issue of the interest payments. So I haven't followed closely enough to know if anything's been added in that's, you know, intending to recoup for these nonprofits any of the costs they're incurring by borrowing money at this point in time. Have you heard anything?
I have not, other than a while back, Governor Wolf saying that the interest costs would be covered. I'm wondering, now that you mention it, if that's why we see an increase in the homeless assistance line item and the HSDF line item. If some of that may be program-related and some of it is intended to cover interest. I don't know specifically.
I'd like you to repeat the increase that you talked about, the Keystone Communities. How much did you say it increased by?
Yes, okay. So Keystone Communities, which is at Department of Community and Economic Development, it was created a few years back under Governor Corbett, actually combined several line items, primarily the Elm Street, Main Street KOZ programs and the accessible housing, which at that point was only $1 million. And then technically the housing and redevelopment assistance line item was eliminated, but out of Keystone Communities, a little bit of redevelopment has gone on when money is available. So you've got community redevelopment, you've got Elm Street, Main Street, and you have accessible housing. The current, the budget for the year that just ended, in July, it was funded at $6.15 million. Fairly small. It had been whittled down and down and down over the years. In fact, the year that they were combined, the previous funding for the three line items had been $28 million, but we're now at $6. And the Senate bill raised it to $25.242, I think. So a little over $25 million. The House bill keeps it at 6.5, let's say 6.7. I don't have the number in front of me, but it was still less than $7 million.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay. Hopefully this will not be on the agenda for January's call, but we'll let you know. We do encourage people to reach out, particularly to their state representatives on this. And I should have said on the federal budget that it's, I guess, something that we didn't get into because we have talked about it on previous calls. The spending caps that had been in place under the Budget Control Act, this is, again, I'm talking about the federal budget, and the so-called sequestration cuts that followed from that we were seeing across the board, like 5% cuts every year. That has been lifted for at least the next 2 years, this current budget year that we're in, and then FY17. The overall spending number is higher, and we're not going to be dealing with the sequestration cuts, which means there's room, there's flexibility for Congress to fund some programs at a higher level. Unfortunately, that does not guarantee that the programs we're interested get funded at a higher level. And so it's really important now, while they're still negotiating this, that people weigh in in favor of the programs that they use. We've been advocating for HUD and USDA housing programs, which, while what we have seen, the Senate sort of did a trial balloon transportation, housing, and urban development T-HUD bill. It restored restored the funding that was proposed to be cut for home and CDBG. It was not horrible, but still insufficient in terms of housing vouchers. All the vouchers that were lost to sequestration have not been reclaimed. There's no funding to rebuild that, and public housing is still underfunded, and other programs. So it's really important to weigh in and say, now that there's flexibility for that, for a higher spending, and encourage your congressperson and our two state senators, Toomey and Casey, to focus on the housing programs because they have such a beneficial effect in so many other areas. So I encourage you to do that as soon as you get off of this call while these talks are underway. As Aaron laid out, it's a tight time frame. The continuing resolution expires on Friday. They'll do a short-term CR. They hope to be out of town by the following Friday. So this all seems very ambitious, but it still gives us a chance to weigh in. So back to the state, same thing. They're negotiating, and they really need to hear from us. They need to hear that getting the budget done is important, but getting a good budget is essential. So getting a budget that funds human services and education, that's really essential. We've been suffering from cuts for the past 6 years. So, again, I encourage you, when you get off this call, make those calls, or go on our website and find the Take Action page and send an email. Other questions on the budget? Okay. Has Carrie joined the call? Carrie Smith? Okay. And I did not get around to sending her a reminder. I'm going to jump ahead to the Blight bill.
I can do that, Cindy.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. And if Carrie doesn't get on, I'll cover the short-term lending also. Wanted to mention to you, I've got 3 bills listed here, but they're all connected, all related to the Municipal Code and Ordinance Compliance Act, which is a law that was passed about 15 years ago, but not a lot of folks are familiar with. It actually says that when somebody buys a property that has known code violations, that they have 18 months to fix it up, which 18 months if it's a building, 12 months if it's a vacant lot. And, of course, the intention was to put a time frame on this. So when you buy the place, you got to get it fixed up. But now that cities and towns have beefed up their code enforcement, they're finding that 18 months is really too long. And so what Senate Bill 942, House Bill 1437, they're identical. What they do is they shorten that 18 months to 12 months and also say that if the municipality is enforcing its own property maintenance code, it can use a shorter time frame. So you don't have to wait the full 12 or give the owner a full 12 months to fix a broken window or something like that, or something dangerous that needs to be fixed right away. House Bill 1480 is coming from a different direction and is responding to what realtors in particular are seeing in a lot of communities around the state, and I'd like to hear whether any of you have experienced this. The scenario is that a municipality under its pre-sale inspection ordinance will go in to a property that is under agreement for sale and find a number of code violations and make the seller make the repairs prior to sale or escrow funds. And it can be a significant enough burden on the seller that it has killed deals in a number of places, and then you have the boomerang effect or whatever, the ripple effect of that transaction doesn't go through, and so the sale of the buyer's property doesn't go through, and down the line. And whereas the Municipal Code and Ordinance Compliance Act was really designed to put the burden on the buyer, and as the realtors point out, when there are code violations, when there are problems with the property, that factors into the sale price. So it's unfair to then make the seller do the repairs, and they have seen deals fall apart in various localities around the state. So what the bill would do is set up a whole process, a whole sort of different scenario of where there are substantial code violations. Well, first of all, I think prohibits escrowing at settlement, and I guess the other thing that's happening is not only the municipalities put the burden on the seller, but also refuse to issue occupancy permits for the buyer. So what the bill does is say if there are violations substantial enough to declare the place unfit for human habitation, that the municipality would still issue I don't remember the term they used, but an access permit, so that the new owner could go in and fix it up, even though wouldn't be allowed to live there. And then if there are violations that are not substantial, that there would be a temporary use and occupancy permit until the violations are corrected. So that's something that's moving through, although I guess there is some concern, I have some concern about the 1480 approach, Representative Santora's approach to deal with the realtors issue of saying leaving that 12 months intact but not allowing for a shorter time under local property maintenance code. I think that there is some language being negotiated that may address that issue. So I wanted to make people aware of that and also find out if you've experienced this in any of your communities where codes enforcement is not letting not granting an occupancy permit, which basically torpedoes a transaction. Star 7 to unmute. Muted your phone. Okay. Well, I will keep people posted on that and other bills. Is Kerry on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. So let me turn it over to you then. Kerry Smith is with Community Legal Services, and for a number of years now she has led a coalition that has successfully defended Pennsylvania's consumer lending laws, and we'll tell you about another potential attack.
Great. Hi, good morning, everybody. So as Cindy mentioned, I'm a legal aid lawyer with Community Legal Services in Philadelphia. The vast majority of my legal practice involves representing homeowners who are in foreclosure or facing other financial distress, and have been working for a number of years on the issue of payday lending, which is really high-cost, 200, 300% interest rate loans that further cause significant financial harm to low-income and vulnerable borrowers. Fortunately, we have one of the strongest laws in the country to protect borrowers against that, and our law has now been effectively enforced not only against storefront operators, but also Internet lenders who make loans over the Internet to Pennsylvania borrowers. And over the last, I think, 4 years, because we have such successful enforcement, the payday lenders have been working to get into Pennsylvania by legalizing their product by passing a bill through the legislature. And we have been successful in stopping that in the past. I wanted to just brief all of you on this issue because you may be wondering, well, how does this relate to housing issues? From our perspective at CLS, where I represent clients who are dealing in mortgage foreclosures, we know that if these kind of high-cost loans are legalized in Pennsylvania, based on data from other states, we know that people fall behind on other bills, they get behind on their mortgage, they get behind on their rent, and it's just going to undermine so much of the work that we're working to do to preserve people's limited assets. This year, the payday lenders are back again, and this time they are proposing and working to bring a predatory product that they offer in other states, an installment payday loan. So typically, in the past, payday loans have been these traditional 2-week balloon payment loans at 300 to 400% APR. Over the last few years, the payday lenders have really changed their business practice, and they are now offering very high-cost installment loans that have a longer term and don't require a balloon payment. Despite that structure of having installment payments, that doesn't necessarily make the loan any safer. And in fact, just to give you an example of an installment loan from the payday lender Check and Go, which is one of the companies that's been fighting to pass a bill in Pennsylvania. In California, where payday loans are legal, they offer a 12-month installment loan where a borrower can borrow $3,000 and then pay back over $7,600 in 1 year. So that's an APR of 218%. So definitely a predatory loan that is so bad that DOD, the Department of Defense, just changed its Military Lending Act rule to make sure that those kind of installment loans are covered by its all-inclusive 36% APR cap, and that would be a cap that includes not just fees, but also not just interest, but also fees. So those kind of loans can't be made to active duty soldiers, but those are the kind of loans that the payday lenders are working to introduce here in Pennsylvania.
Excuse me just a second, Carrie. I want to remind people they can mute their lines with a *6. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sounds like someone's on a construction site or something. So there is no bill filed yet, but there is some draft language that's being circulated. This year, Senator Yudichak, a Democrat from sort of northern tier area, Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, he is going to be filing the bill for the payday lenders. They are hoping to do that right after the budget, but they are now currently soliciting co-sponsors, both Democrats and Republicans. And just as in prior sessions, when the payday lenders have pushed their efforts to legalize their products in Pennsylvania, they try to put a nice new wrapper on what I believe is really would be a destructive predatory loan. In the past, they called them microloans or even Fresh Start. And this year, they're calling it a financial services credit ladder. But as we all know, credit ladders go in both directions. And I think if this bill became a law, it would really push our clients further down the financial ladder. It would authorize installment loans for a minimum term of 12 months, so it would be a longer-term 1-year loan. Loan amounts could be between $1,000 and $5,000. While the loan term is longer, 1 year, the draft proposal does not address refinancing in that 12-month period. In other words, people can be continually rolled over or refinanced. And data from other states that have high-cost installment loans shows that about 60% of borrowers get trapped and refinance these loans. The proposal would allow for extremely high charges. it has a slightly deceptive interest rate. So there's a part of the bill that authorizes a 36% interest rate, which isn't so bad after all. 36% APR is what the Military Lending Act covers, but the Military Lending Act includes fees in that 36%, and this proposal does not. In addition to the 36% interest rate, it would also allow for a litany of other fees with no maximum cap set on those fees. Essentially would allow a lender to submit a fee schedule to the Department of Banking to cover all of their costs, including personnel, overhead, whatever it costs them to run a lending operation in Pennsylvania. And then the department would have to approve that fee schedule if it includes their cost and add, quote unquote, a reasonable return on investment for the lender. So it's a little strange. The proposal literally asks the state to ensure a private business's profitability, which is a little strange when we're basically saying what's the profitability for a predatory lender. The payday lenders would still be able to directly access a borrower's bank account, while the proposal mirrors federal law, which says lender wouldn't be able to require access to the bank account as a condition of getting the loan. The bill doesn't prohibit access or even ensure that a borrower's consent is not coercive. We're very, very concerned that this product would be extremely harmful to people, will cause them to fall behind on other bills, put them sort of further down the financial ladder. We've seen in other states where these kind of loans are available, there's a dramatic increase in people turning to social services, whether it be food banks or other social services, because the vast majority of their limited income and assets is going back to the predatory lender. So no bill at this point, but I wanted to make everyone aware of it, and I hope you would reach out to your senators and let them know that the payday lenders are back, that you're concerned about this bill because this proposal because it has no cap on fees that lenders could charge, and encourage them not to co-sponsor the legislation. There is a coalition of over 100 groups that's been working together over the last few years to keep predatory lending out of Pennsylvania. We have a website for more information. It's stoppayday.loans.pa.com. If you would like to be on the coalition email list, please feel free to contact me, and I will put you on that list. My email is ksmith@clsphila.org. That's ksmith@clsphila.org.
Thank you, Carrie. Comprehensive as usual, but I really appreciate the information. Do people have questions for Carrie? *7, your phone to unmute it. Questions about this proposal or about payday lending in general? All right, I think everybody is pretty worn out by the budget fiasco and everything else that's going on, and anxiously looking forward to holidays. This in between Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, Christmas lull, and Kwanzaa and all of the other holidays. But really, does anybody have any comments or questions, either for Carrie or for anything else that we've talked about? Okay, and anything else for the good of the order? Anything going on in your communities that you'd like to report on? You can unmute your phone with a *7. I thank you all for getting on. Wish you joyous holidays and a speedy resolution to these budget situations. Hope that your organizations are faring okay. And we will talk to you in January. Thank you. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.